Check 1 2. Well, good morning, everyone. I appreciate my committee being here, and those of you in the audience. Good early Tuesday morning. I'd like to ask Representative Mathis to open us up in a word of prayer.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you for such a beautiful day. We'd ask that you would bless everyone that's here and their families. We just ask that you be with us in the decisions that we make, everything that we say, everything that we do will be pleasing to you. For us in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Representative Mathis. This morning is hearing only for House Bill 1150. And I love to have the testimony of those out. We only have an hour, so I'm going to ask those in the audience to keep it as short as possible. We'll try to time you. I don't want to have to cut you off, but speak to the bill. I know some of you might be passionate about lots of things, but let's sort of speak to the bill. And we have a substitute this morning for 1150. That the committee should have in their folders. It's a short bill, but look at it. I'm going to come down and speak to the bill and let Vice Chairman or Secretary Stephen Meeks take over here. That is all we're going to try to cover today. Be on the lookout, committee, for another committee meeting later this week. I think we have it set for Thursday afternoon. I will be in further contact with you. I apologize for the notices going out, council, this sort of thing. We were going to try to do it tomorrow, but that did not work out. So we're on for Thursday afternoon. I know everybody's going to want to get away and get back home. We're not here on Friday, but Chairman Perkle's got a bill we want to hear. And so again, just contact me if the committee's got any concerns about any of these bills. We're trying to have hearings, input from all sides, and then come back and we'll sort of have some more hearings on these bills. So things will start to pick up a little faster as we get closer to crossover day, and we've got these bills that are important bills that I want to get right and move along. So thank you for your patience. I'll turn this over to Secretary Meeks. Good morning. Thank you.
The floor is yours, sir.
And members of the committee, I'm speaking this morning from LC 510122S. Has everybody got that? That's our latest substitute. And
would you repeat that number one more time, Mr. Chairman, please?
LC, wait a minute, Dave. LC 510122S. Yes, I know. One very, very slight change. Okay. Yes. I apologize. Got this hot off the press late yesterday afternoon. So it's a short bill, and to give you a little history, I asked Leg Council and others to get for this freedom to farm something simple. I am not an attorney, and anytime you get into these type issues can get very complicated. And so I wanted something I could understand. I wanted something this committee could understand. I know we have two attorneys on this committee that I've asked for help, and they've been very, I hope they'll continue to give some input and help into it, but it's this issue has been complicated. So I was trying trying to keep it as simple as I could, so I could understand it. And you know, the intent is we go through the bill, and I'll just go through the bill as I go through it. And so we're only in code section 41-1-7. We're not trying to make a heavy lift here, change a lot of law. We're just trying to clarify what the law says. And really there on line 4, it says to limit the circumstances under which agricultural facilities and operations may be sued for a nuisance. And that is all we're trying to do, to limit the circumstances, to do some clarity in the law to make sure both sides, farmers as well as neighbors, know what, when, and how they could, there's a nuisance. And so as I renamed it to the Freedom to Farm Act, Senator Larry Walker and I came up with that. So on line 14, it's the declared policy of the state to conserve, protect, and encourage the development and improvement of its agriculture, forest land, and facilities for production and distribution of food. And that is what I'm all about in this bill. That was the intent when this law was passed years and years ago, is to protect and preserve. And as a farmer, and many of you are farmers, we go to great lengths to preserve our farmland and to protect it. I feel like I'm one of the biggest preservers of our natural resources and land, our air and water and soil in this state. And I think most farmers are that, and they live on their farm, pass their farms down to the next generation, and want to be good stewards of the land. However, things do change. Years ago, Georgia and other parts of the country was a very agricultural state. Everybody made their living and on the farm or worked on the farm, and that's just not the case, as you know, today. We have urban encroachment all across our state, not only in metro areas, but in our rural areas. We have urban farmers trying to farm in tight spaces, and this bill addresses that too. We want to be able to encourage young farmers, new farmers coming into the business, give them some certainty with the law, as well as our urban farmers trying to grow small acreage and in the midst of a lot of housing and commercial development around it. So that is a little bit of this this bill, sort of on line 24, by limiting the circumstances under which agricultural facilities and operations may be deemed to be a nuisance. Just giving some certainty to what's going on our farm. As we come on down to line 36, we start giving some definitions to what is a farm, what, commercial production or processing of crops, livestock, animals, poultry, honeybees, goes on and on. So some definitions. Continuing on line 43, 47, 50, continuing on down to F, G, H, I, just trying to find what agriculture is. And then line 63, agricultural support facilities. So we're trying to include most everything in what is agriculture. Continuing on line 82, we are defining that. At 85, our forestry is very important in our state, growing our trees and pulp and paper. I'm a very intensive tree farmer, planting trees, fertilize them at times, burning, harvesting. It's a big part of our economy here in the state of Georgia is our forestry. we took out struck some definitions there, talking about urban sprawl and change conditions earlier. And then had then you go to line 101. And this is just a definition of what a swine feeding operation is. And then line 105, no agriculture facility, agriculture operation, or agriculture operation, go through there. And then on line 109, if the facility operation has been in operation for 1 year or more, the provisions of this description shall not apply when a nuisance results from the negligent, improper, illegal operation of any such facility. So if a farm, what that line is saying is farm's been in operation for 1 year or more, then some of the ordinary operations that's been going on that farm shall not apply when there's should not be a nuisance. And that's the time set. The 1 year operation is what we're is the time that you don't have a reset for a nuisance. And then on down in line 119, for the purposes of this code, the commencement operation of a swine feeding shall create a separate and independent established data operation. So I heard the problems with the CAFO, these confined feeding operations. We did not, we wanted that time to reset. If a farmer wanted to go into that line of business, change their farm from what they've been doing to turn it into a CAFO, people were concerned that we would give grandfather that farm in. And so we said, no, it will reset if you want to go in that operation. And so this sort of takes the CAFO out of that protection. And so that is the bill. It's pretty straightforward. We just really are looking to clarify what a nuisance is and what it is not, and when a farm can be sued for those. Is protection that really farmers thought we always had. Some other areas of the country, some different interpretations of what is going on a farm with encroachment. And so we're just trying to follow the legislative intent that's always been there in Georgia for protection of farms. It's always been farming. There's some ambiguity in the law, or some interpretation and ambiguity in some areas that we just want this clarity for our farmers. We're not changing any environmental protection, regulations, rules, zoning. We're not trying to override those at all. Those are still in place and does not apply to this bill. You know, as a farmer, I worry about a lot of things out there. I worry about the weather. I worry about rain, drought. I worry about market prices. I worry about labor. But don't let farmers have to worry about getting sued left and right, doing what they've always done. And that's what this bill is about. It's just trying to give farmers some protection to farm their land like they've always farmed it. When you have some neighbors who might move in and have a little different opinion. You know, farming's very capital intensive. It's a very large investment, and farmers need some certainty. Lenders need the certainty that they're not going to be sued. You know, my legal department, my farm, you're looking at him. We don't have. I got a lot of other things I got to do besides deal with nuisance lawsuits from neighbors, from things I've been doing all along. And so that's what this bill's about. It's not a big lift. It's not a big move. We're not trying to give any new protections. We're just trying to clarify the protections that's been in the law that that Georgia's thought we had. We want to ensure that we've got that. We got a lot of small farms in this state. 98% farms in this state are family owned. And I want to keep these small family owned farms going in Georgia. And that's my intent on this bill, to give that legal certainty to those of us that farm. So not a long bill, doesn't do a lot other than just give some clarity to what we already have in the law. I hope y'all see it that way. I know we got a lot of other people behind me that want to speak to this bill. I'll give the mic up to those.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Do you want to take a couple of questions or you?
Yeah, I'll take a couple of
Okay.
questions of committee.
All right, just, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your presentation, and just wanted to make sure that everybody understands in the substitute, Mr. Chairman, starting on line 122 through 124, that this code section shall not apply to animal feeding operations or CAFOs. I know that was a lot of conversation that you had with members of the committee and others, and just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that was included in this piece and the substitute here as presented by the chairman.
Thank you. Yes, for clarifying that. I didn't do it very good, but that is certainly heard that concern, and that's why that is in there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Mitchell. Are you with us, Representative Mitchell?
Yes, Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Great. I had a question. This now has a 1-year time frame. Is that consistent with what we previously had before, or am I remembering correctly that that's shorter? Sorry, I don't have the bill directly in front of me. Hello?
I'll repeat it, but we need to turn off our mic. Okay, Mr. Chairman, what she was asking is, it was her understanding that there is a 1-year time frame in the bill, but previously there was a 4-year time frame for those nuisance.
My understanding is presently a 1 year.
It's presently a
timeframe.
1 year. Okay.
That's my understanding.
Okay. All righty. Number 12, Chairman Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this bill. It's great bill. I just want to clarify on this CAFO. If we're currently a cow-calf producer and we decide there's a lot of this, direct beef sales is really on the move, and we decide to start finishing those animals on the farm, then we would be excluded, and this bill would apply to us directly on that.
And I apologize. My understanding in code, there's definition of what is a CAFO and what's not. We have a large CAFO and a medium CAFO and a small CAFO. And this bill does the large and medium CAFOs, but keeps a definition of small. And what you're describing would be a small, where you grow your own feed them mainly, and it's a limited number of animals in a small CAFO.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, this is also, Bill, to remind the committee, a priority of the Rural Development Council that you Chairman.
It most certainly is, Mr. Chairman. We thank you for all your hard work on it.
Well, thank you for the hard work of Rural Development Council and making this a priority.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Watson. Chairman Dickey, we have a question from on Zoom from Representative Lewis Ward. We'll see if we can. Representative Lewis Ward, are you with us?
I am, and thank you so much. And forgive me if this question was answered already. My sound is going in and out. In the bill that I have, the definition for the agriculture area has been deleted, and I didn't see it anywhere else in the bill. Was that intentional to leave out that definition for agriculture area?
Well, I consider everywhere a good agriculture area. I want an ag in rural Georgia. I want it in metro, or we've got some, I want to keep Georgia agriculture state. Our largest industry in this state is agriculture, and I want to keep it that way. Keep us thriving, keep us profitable, keep us competitive. And that's a little bit of what this bill is about, is just to keep Georgia farmers competitive in our state, and be able to farm anywhere in this state within reason, as long as you're following the law and rules and regulations of our state and local conditions as well. And that's a little bit of what this bill's about.
Would you stand, yield for a further question?
I will.
In terms of the definition itself, it talks about land and where someone can farm. Is it not important to just have that definition in the bill?
I don't think so. I'll have to let some of my attorneys possibly answer some of these questions about definitions and things. It gets pretty technical when you go to changing and making definitions and different routes on this bill. And again, I try to keep it simple, straightforward. Agriculture is complicated, lots of different situations, and that's what we ran into trying to craft this bill. Is we're changing conditions on our farm all the time. We're expanding, we're rotating crops, we're doing different things different times of year. So it gets very complicated when you on some definitions on what's farming, and if that's kind of what you're speaking to.
Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, council would like to respond to that for you.
Mr. Chair, I was just going to say that the reason that we've removed that definition is because the only place that it appears is in the definition of urban sprawl, which then only appears in the definition of a changed condition, which is being removed from the body of the bill on lines 107 and 108. So without needing that definition for changed conditions, we don't need the definitions for the terms within the definition of a changed condition.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, counsel, for that explanation.
And I want to say thank you to our legal counsel, Dave Barrett. Thank you for your work and help on this, and being there, being available for this bill.
All right, next we have Representative Bentley on Zoom. Representative Bentley, are you available?
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Good morning. I just want to make certain that Chairman Dickey and members of the committee and those from my area of the state that may be watching don't see me in the room, that know that I am on Zoom and I am supporting this bill and following this legislation. So thank you, Chairman Dickey, for your work. And as a member of the Rural Development Council, I just want to make sure that you know that I do support this legislation. Thank you again.
Thank you, Representative Bentley. Representative Leverett.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this bill. This is a priority of not only the farm bureaus in a lot of the counties in my district, but of the chambers of commerce in a lot of the counties in my district. So I appreciate it. To address a question earlier, if I might, Mr. Chairman, my understanding of the law as it exists is it was primarily directed toward an area of nuisance law called coming to the nuisance, which was a defense often in these cases. So the scenario would be you're in an agricultural area, you've got a farm, your neighbors are in agriculture, and then one of them sells to a real estate developer, and suddenly they build a subdivision next door to you. And then the people in the subdivision say, well, gee, we don't really appreciate all the smells. And the idea is, well, you should have walked out here before you bought your house because the smells have been here all along. And so it was to try to put in statute what had been a judge-made defense of coming to the nuisance, and sort of set out some standards and specific dates and time limits so that ag farmers could utilize that. I think what the chairman has done with this bill is, as council mentioned, there was a whole concept of change conditions. And that's being removed, and we're sort of inserting a 1-year statute of limitations or statute of repose for the operation of agriculture operation. Once it's been in operation for a year, you can't then complain about the agricultural operation because someone spent a lot of money and spent a lot of time investing in that operation. And that's an expectation that they should feel after a year that they're okay, that everyone's okay with it. So my understanding of what we're doing here is we're somewhat broadening the protection, but we're keeping it at a year, and we're adding some exceptions, and we're preserving the existing exceptions that were already in the statute, which is if you're operating illegally or you're operating not in accordance with law, you don't get that protection as an ag operation. And then you're further adding not only medium and large CAFO, but a swine feeding operation, which might not necessarily be a CAFO. And so those are exceptions that would not be entitled to those protections. So I think it's crafting attempting to craft a balance of the various interests involved in instituting some additional protections for people who are doing it right, but not trying to protect operations who are not doing it right. So I appreciate the effort.
Well said, Representative Leverett. That's exactly why I'm farming and you're practicing law. And and next time I come down here, I'm gonna have you sitting right here, answer my questions, because I warned y'all, I am not an attorney. And so I feel at a very big disadvantage in trying to answer questions and present this bill, but you did that very, very well. And I appreciate that more than you know.
Mr. Secretary, if I might, I would say, Mr. Chairman, when you said I'm looking at your legal department, well, when I look at you, I'm looking at my food department. And when I look at everybody on this committee, I'm looking at my food department. So I appreciate y'all running your operations so well.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the explanation and simplifying what I totally had everybody confused about. But anyway, it is, in my opinion, it's a simple, try to be a simple move, simple clarification of the laws we have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We got two more questions, then we'll move on to speakers. Representative LaRicchia.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the reason we're working on this bill today is because you're not a lawyer. And you're bringing probably the most important piece of legislation we will look at this year under this gold dome. I worry a little bit that we could go further because of the scenarios I see in my district where families are all of a sudden inheriting farms that are 75, 100, 250 acres. The timber's mature. They need to cut it and sell it. The prices are good, but they want to put 4 chicken houses on it. And we, believe it or not, in South Georgia, we have a little bit of urban sprawl. I live in a subdivision that's way out in the country that has 500 acres of agriculture behind it. Occasionally they spread chicken litter. And I think sometimes it's hard for us to look 25 and 50 years down the road while we're here. And I just want to make sure that this bill carries this out far enough to protect us from some of the future urban sprawl where my children may inherit 50 acres and decide a cattle operation, we're working on right now, farm to table with smaller cattle operations and the odors or whatever. I'll close with this in the form of a question. I don't believe that we do a good enough job of educating the general population of how important agriculture is, not just to the economy, but to life and food and the future. And does this bill go far enough?
Thank you for that. Representative Lim.
I had a question, and this might be for my fellow attorney, Representative Leverett. So you mentioned the coming to the nuisance defense, and that's something all lawyers studied in towards. I'm just curious whether it's Representative Leverett or someone else. How would this apply when the let's call them the neighbors are already there, and then the farm is the one coming in? So that's not a coming to the nuisance because the neighbors were there first. I'm just curious how this bill would apply in those circumstances.
Representative Leverett, you want to try to help me?
Yes, sir. That's right. As I read the statute, it eliminates a lot of the provisions that were directed at that defense. So it would it now is moving more from dealing with that defense to establishing what I would call a statute of repose. And in exchange, it then adds a couple of additional exceptions for some of the I guess, what you would say are the more alarming operations, which have drawn some attention. And it also preserves exceptions for operations which are not being conducted in a legal manner or proper manner.
Thank you, Representative Ledge Council.
Yeah, I was just going to address that, Mr. Chair, that in that instance, the person filing the nuisance would still have 1 year in that first year to, if they have a nuisance that happens, a claim can be made because that is a new date of operation, presumably for that agricultural facility. And then they have, based on the entire nuisance title that we have, a 4-year window for a statute of limitations on which to file that claim. So if the nuisance happens within the first year, then the claim could be made, and then they have 4 years to file it.
Thank you, Council. Mr. Chairman, I don't see any more questions for you. Thank you for your presentation and your commitment to agriculture in our state. Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and move into the sign-up sheet. We got a number of people who have signed up to speak. We're going to limit the time to about 3 minutes to speak. That'll give us plenty of time for questions thereafter. And we'll start Mr. Brian Toller, Georgia Urban Ag Council. Sorry about that, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Good to be with you all, and thank you, Chairman Dickey, for your leadership on this issue. It's a very important issue, as has already been discussed here. I'm Brian Toller here representing the Georgia Urban Ag Council today, and our membership represents turf grass, nursery, landscape, and all the components that go into those particular sectors. So that is my frame of mind as I look at this issue. It doesn't deal directly with CAFO related matters, which I know has also been a focus. I'll start on the onset. I want to say that our first priority is do no harm. We have a statute and it has served Georgia well. We know it needs to be adjusted. We recognize that. We want to make sure, as in the past, we've seen these discussions, there's been amendments in the process that have actually taken Georgia's right to farm, or freedom to farm, as we're calling it now, and it's been a step backward. And we need to make sure that we don't go backward. I know that certainly is the chairman's objective. I do not have a copy of the new bill, but I don't need it right now. I want to reference one particular component, and that is the definition of an agricultural operation that is in your bill. It was previously on page 2, line 41. It may still be on that particular section. I'm not sure. But what we're requesting in that is that particular section has a lot of definitions, components of what is an agricultural operation: tillage, fertilizer, pesticide applications, and all that. And in reviewing this, there's a couple of components that we do hear complaints about in the ag sector that are not covered. And we would like the committee to consider adding these components. And it's really 3 pieces. One is dust. A lot of farm operations, especially those in sod operations, when that sod is harvested, you have a dusty open field. And so it's not just dust. You can certainly do it with peanut combine. I mean, there's a ton of dust with peanuts. But as we continue to get closer with agriculture and urban development, those can be issues. And so I would encourage the committee to take a look at adding dust. Another component is noise. Noise can be measured, the decibel level. Sometimes odor is subjective. Noise is not subjective. Some people's hearing is better than others, but it is measurable. And so we think noise is an issue as well. Last but not least, we have our forestry friends here. And this is a big issue for them. It's also an issue for Chairman Dickey in his operation, but smoke. When we're doing controlled burns, you're doing issues where you're pushing up, it could be pecan trees, it could be certainly peach trees, and those are burned to remove them. And so that could be a component. So I would encourage the committee to take a look at smoke, dust, and noise as to add in that agricultural operation definition. Last but not least, I want to throw one piece in, and this is an issue of science. Agriculture is an industry of science. We've seen it develop over the years, especially the last decade. It has changed tremendously. I would say probably the last 2 decades. And when our industry that I serve in turf grass, the University of Georgia worked with USDA and received some grant funds to develop a drought tolerant turf grass to use less water. That is science. It was bred grass. It comes out of the University of Georgia down in the Tifton facility, and it's called Tif Tuff. And there are other grasses that are coming on the market to help save water. We all know how important that is. There are issues that same application can be used to help reduce issues related to odor, as well as other farm practices. And so I would encourage that the issue of science is important. We know it, we see it every day. And if we can continue to use science to help curb some of these other nuisance related matters, then we'll all be better off for the future. Just as Representative Ricky has said earlier, we need to look way down the road and believe science is an answer to that. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Mr. Toller. Charlotte with, yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't read the handwriting there. Farmer from Gordon County. Thank you. You're, just come up to the podium. Yes, ma'am, please. If you would just remind everybody, keep your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning. So I don't have the revised version. So the CAFO bit, can I read what that looks like? Anyway, I'm Charlotte Swansea. I have a 300-acre farm in Gordon County. We raise hogs and cattle and row crops and vegetables, and we direct market all of our products to people in Atlanta. We're a multi-generational family farm. We've been farming in Gordon County since the 70s. And I personally like the old bill. It seems to protect us very well. Farmers want to be good neighbors. We do. We want to be good stewards of the land. And for the most part, especially in Gordon County, that's been happening. And Gordon County, is Mr. Jaspers here today? Nope. He's my district guy. But in our county, there was proposal of bringing in a 150 chicken house operation. And under the current bill, we still have protection to litigate against something like that. If we pass the 1150 bill, the version that I had, they could come in and do what they want. That's why I wanted to read about the CAFO situation. Is that on the very bottom? Is it just apply to swine?
It's the bottom of page 5. And the
Does
top
it
of
just
page
apply
6.
to swine, or does it also apply to chickens?
Yeah, let's, if you got specific questions on the language, we can have that conversation with Let's Counsel. But let's, if you will, continue with your remarks, please. Thank you.
So and I'll just keep it short and sweet. Yes, I think the current bill does protect us. And it was concerning to see so much crossed out and basically repealing the old bill to replace it with this one. And my concern is that we're weakening the bill, and I don't want it to get weakened. I want it to be a strong bill to protect my farm and my son. And when he goes on to farm, if he wants to, well, he does want to farm, I want him to be able to farm and do it without being a nuisance to, the subdivisions that are coming our way in Gordon County. But we also don't want to have nuisance farmers, integrators coming into our county and basically destroying and, creating going beyond the carrying capacity of our land and our water and our air, which some of these CAFOs do take it way beyond the carrying capacity. That's why they smell so bad. But yeah, that's about it. Please keep the old bill, or let's keep discussing it and make it a strong bill for our future generations.
Thank you, Ms. Charlotte. We appreciate your time today, and thank you for being here. Mr. Mike Giles, Georgia Poultry Federation. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mike Giles. I'm president of the Georgia Poultry Federation. We're a trade association, represents poultry growers, poultry processors, and allied industries in Georgia, the nation's leading broiler producing state. The original bill that's been referenced, it's in code now, was adopted about 40 years ago. And as with a lot of major pieces of legislation or sections of the code, they're amended and evolve over time as circumstances in Georgia change. And that's certainly, I think, the case with right to farm, as was mentioned earlier, with the freedom to farm legislation. There was the concept of coming to the nuisance, and I think everyone agrees with that. It's a well-established principle, but if you think back to early 1980s, there were likely parts of Georgia in rural areas where people had not come yet, and they're anticipating. Well, I think the legislature at that time anticipated that people would be moving into rural areas and near farms. People who are not farmers, they move into agriculturally zoned areas, for example. Well, that's certainly happened over time, and there is now created some uncertainty about new investments, and so this legislature, I think, is, as I mentioned earlier, is looking forward to the next few decades and what might happen in Georgia. I would say that even in rural areas, it's very difficult to find a place in Georgia where there's already not non-farming people living around proposed new farms. So I'm going to give you two examples that hopefully will illustrate how this could play out in rural areas and then also in urban areas. So as currently stands, in order for a farmer to an agricultural operation to present the defense that's in current code, there has to be a changed condition external to the farm. In other words, the farmer doesn't control what is a changed condition. So I think a lot of people believe we've had this law on the books for around 40 years, that if you've been in operation for a year and you're operating legally, properly, and without negligence, then you have the right to farm, previously called protection. Well, that's not the case, because there has to be a changed condition. Let me give you one example. Let's say that I'm the farmer and that you all have homes in the general area of my farming operation that pre-existed my farm. When we live harmoniously, there's no problems over a long period of time. And then over time, people start moving out, moving in, ownerships of the homes change. I would call that a changed condition. You've got a new person living near my farm that hasn't lived by me for all this time. Well, under the law, I'm not so sure that qualifies as a changed condition. Now let's move to urban area. Urban agriculture, there's a major trend in the world to produce food closer to the consumers and in urban areas. And these would be large-scale farming operations in urban areas. If you think about the nature of an urban area, the conditions have already changed around the farm or around that proposed urban farm. So looking forward, as I think this bill should do, then it's very unlikely that an new urban farm would ever reach right to farm protection as it's currently written. So those are two examples that we think are very important and realistic and in the future going forward. So we support this bill and hope that you'll give it favorable condition.
Thank you, Mike. We appreciate your time today. Thank you very
Thanks.
much. Mr. Will Bentley, Georgia Agribusiness Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Will Bentley with the Georgia Agribusiness Council, and we're a membership organization that represents over 1,300 farms and agribusinesses across the state. I do want to emphasize, though, that's my profession, but personally, I'm a farmer as well. So being a steward of the land and air and water and the things that go into agriculture and managing that land is extremely important to me and my family. So when we look at this bill, it's something that we really consider as we're trying to write and help with legislation. And I think that's important to note, because a lot of times you'll hear that we're the big corporate lobbyists that are out here trying to hurt farms, and that's simply not true. I farm directly beside my parents' farm. our streams flow into their stream. So everything that we do, I have that in mind when we look at legislation up here. And I just thought that was needed to be said with some of the emails that y'all are probably receiving about who is pushing this bill. Chairman Dickey and Mike and others have done a good job of going into details of the bill, so I won't do that. But I do want to point out a couple of things that this bill does not do. This bill does not change any environmental law, rule, or regulation regarding what you can and cannot do on a farm. If you look at the roughly 5 or 6 pages of that bill, zero changes to any rule or regulation of what you can or cannot do on your farm. I think that's extremely important to note, that we're not changing anything that a farmer can do or can't do. We're simply trying to cut back on frivolous lawsuits that are occurring in our state and other places around the country as well. This bill does not change anything that would protect a bad actor. So if you're operating on your farm improperly, illegally, or negligently, this bill does not protect you. This bill protects farmers that are operating in normal farming practices and doing it the right way. It's clear cut. If you look through the language, it does nothing to protect bad actors. This bill does not change the time frame within which a neighbor of a farm can bring suit against that farm. If you look, I think it's in subsection C, maybe on the last page still. It may have moved up a page or two. It addresses the 1 year time frame. That has not been changed in this new piece of legislation. That's existing from the 1980s. And I think that's another thing that's important to note out as well. So what does the bill actually do? It removes the ambiguity and subjective nature of nuisance lawsuits. It protects a farm that is operating properly from nuisance lawsuits from outside groups, not just their neighbors. What we're seeing is outside groups getting together and looking for financial windfalls and going after these farms, small family farms, medium-sized farms, large farms. It's all the same. It's the same opportunity that they look at when they look to these nuisance lawsuits. It provides family farms and agribusinesses with certainty that their freedom to farm protections are in place as long as they are following the rules and regulations put in place in Georgia by the EPD, the Department of Agriculture, and several other agencies that are state and local in nature. And then also, I'll close by saying thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing that regarding the CAFOs and the hog feeding operations. We mentioned or had some questions through text about small farms. This is specifically going after the language on medium and large, and what it would do would give you that opportunity for the clock to reset when they're established and when that operation commences. We've also heard that somebody could put in a hog feeding facility and not do anything for a year and then start a year later. This addresses the commencement of that operation, which I think is important. I think Chairman Dickey did a great job of looking at the concerns of many outside groups, and we appreciate y'all taking this up, and we ask for your favorable consideration at the right time.
Thank you, Mr. Bentley. Tanya, Savannah Riverkeeper. Welcome. Thank you for being here today, and the mic is yours. Just remind you 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Tanya Bonatadabas. I serve as the Savannah Riverkeeper. I live in Augusta, Georgia. I actually live on a piece of property my great grandparents bought in the 50s. I raise goats. We are meat farmers, I guess. They also are really good at clearing our bamboo. So it's they're nice to have around, but we are completely surrounded by neighborhoods. I live 0.5 miles outside of Gate 5, Fort Gordon. So we are this little, it's called Panther Springs Farm, a little farm that is completely surrounded. Now, I say that to say I have ag, I have animals, but I understand that it is very important for me to make sure that my animals and the waste coming from those animals is my responsibility. And the reason for that is because I also, not only with Savannah Riverkeeper, I have the opportunity to serve as a board member and as the council chair for Waterkeeper Alliance, which is 360 organizations worldwide. And so I've had the opportunity to see worldwide many different ag operations. And what I'd like to talk to you today about specifically is poop and parts. And both of those things I think are very important, and they are the waste product that come from the animal operations throughout Georgia, throughout the Southeast and worldwide. Animal husbandry has a long history in Georgia. I am not here to say that we need to get rid of all the farmers. I don't think we should. You should be able to grow your own meat. However, any type of industry or business has to be responsible for the waste that it creates. Currently in Georgia, we don't do a good job of regulating that waste. Because of that, for the last 13 years, I have spent time in Elberton, Georgia. I don't know if any of you have heard of Mr. John Halsey, but I'm not a fan. And I'm not the only one who's not a fan. And that is because he takes the waste from different operations and fats, oils, grease, not just byproducts from animals, spreads it on the ground and calls it a soil amendment. Now, there is a code, OCGA 216, currently that restricts ag and silviculture from any type of local ordinances, right? Well, in Wilkes County now, we have another one of these sludge operations or spreading.
If I could interrupt you
operations.
for
I'm
just a
sorry.
moment, ma'am, could we be focused on the current bill at hand and not the
Yes.
situation and the soil amendments that you're talking about? Thank
Sure.
you.
So, all right. So, as of today in Georgia, I am aware of Oglethorpe, Madison, Wilkes, Elberton, Jefferson, and Burke, all dealing with situations where we have land application, soil injection, and spreading that I would argue is not ag, but qualifies as such. In Augusta, we also have a meat packing operation. The waste from that operation in the last 5 years has dumped numerous 18-wheelers of their waste onto Highway 1. The city of Augusta has had to pay to clean it up, and they've not been held responsible. What I would like to ask is that you will remove the coverage of the waste stream from this bill. Specifically to look at page 2 of the version that I have, line 42, and to add in an exclusion for any prep of soil that includes surface or subsurface disposal of industrial waste byproducts, animal waste byproducts discarded after the production of saleable meat products. So I'm asking, please, that you remove this waste stream from this bill, because right now, the communities do not have the ability to control or be able to stand up for these products coming in, and you're removing one more avenue for anybody to have a say-so for
Thank
a
you.
problem that already exists. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. We appreciate your time this morning. Ms. Brooke Lapp, did I get that right? Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Brooke Lappy, and I'm a policy intern at Science for Georgia. And we're a nonprofit dedicated to making sure science facts are known and used appropriately in public policy. I've lived in Georgia for 3 years, but I moved from Farmington, Missouri. It's a rural community that's dependent on agriculture for their economy. And I understand the necessity of farmers and the needs of local farmers. We understand there's an intent to clarify that expanding to feedlots and large animal operations are not covered in this bill, and we haven't seen the most updated bill, but we want to encourage this committee along those lines by sharing what the science shows about the impact of CAFOs on health and our environment. We know the EPA identified CAFOs as polluters in the 70s because of the way they discharge waste into the water. The most pressing public health issues with CAFOs are from the waste that they produce. These CAFOs can produce more than 1.6 million tons of waste per year, and that's more than the annual sanitary waste of many urban cities. Livestock waste contains a variety of harmful chemicals and pathogens, and all of which have demonstrated negative health impacts. These, although human waste facilities are treated through sewage plants, no such treatment facilities exist for livestock waste, and humans are exposed to waste contaminants and pathogens through the water they drink, the air they breathe, and the insects around them. Many Americans' water source is groundwater, in fact, over 50%. And in the US, approximately 35,000 miles of rivers in 22 states have been contaminated with animal waste. When manure is linked into ground and surface water, excess nitrogen is transported through runoff to surrounding farms and properties. And these nitrates and nitrogen poisons people and is harmful to infants. It's also harmful to adults, leading to low blood oxygen and birth defects, miscarriages, cancers, and poor general health. Nitrates also cause reduced tree growth, crop yield, plant death, and harmful algal blooms in waterways, impacting multiple Georgia industries. CAFO manure contains over 150 pathogens such as E. coli and Salmonella. These are easily transported to surrounding waterways. When humans drink contaminated water, it negatively impacts their health, and with an especially high risk to young children, pregnant women, elderly, and the immunocompromised. In addition to impacting water quality, decomposing manure at CAFOs reduces air quality in the surrounding areas. CAFOs have been found to increase asthma in neighboring communities, and the most typical air pollutants found from these farms are ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, methane, and particulate matter. All have evidence-based research showing they demonstrate risks to human health, showing bronchitis, cardiac arrest, and decreased lung function. Occupational workers of these farms are also at risk with unsafe levels of toxic gases, with 1 in 4 CAFOs workers diagnosed with bronchitis. CAFOs with large amounts of animals and waste are also breeding grounds for insects, which transmit diseases. Additionally, 80% of antibiotics in the US are used on animals, many of which are not sick. This also perpetuates to antibiotic-resistant microbes, which is a national problem and causes 2.8 million infections and 35,000 deaths per year. So science shows that CAFOs pose severe threats to public health. We acknowledge all issues are complex and have many sides, and we acknowledge that you're working on editing this bill. And so our concerns lie with the fact that House Bill 1150 could further open the door for CAFOs, which, as the science says, has detrimental effects on human health and the environment.
Thank you.
So when making a decision, we just urge you to consider health
Thank you.
effects and crop impacts. And that's all.
Thank you for your time today. Appreciate you being here. April Liscombe, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I will try to be brief. My name is April Lipscomb. I am an attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center. We are an environmental nonprofit advocacy organization. Quick disclaimer, though, I am not a private plaintiff's lawyer, so I do not file nuisance lawsuits against anybody. So don't get mad at me when I start bringing up points that y'all may not want to hear about this bill. We oppose this bill as it's currently written, though, for a couple of reasons. The first is just bad policy. So what this bill does is says that we value newly arriving industrial scale animal operations more than we value longstanding Georgians' private property rights. And let me explain that by giving you an example. And I've had a lot of coffee, so I'm a little jittery. Sorry about that. So I want all of you to imagine where you currently live. Think about how long you've lived there. Think about your families who live with you. For some Metro folks, this might be a little awkward to think about, but now imagine a large animal operation moves in next door to you, into your family, okay? Under existing nuisance law, if that operation starts creating a nuisance a couple of years after they move in next to you, the odors are really bad, you can't enjoy your time outside, your property values maybe tank, you want to move, but you can't sell your house. Under a current nuisance law, you have 4 years from the date of the nuisance to protect your private property rights. You can file a lawsuit and try to prove to a judge that you deserve to be compensated. You don't automatically win, but you have that opportunity under existing law. Okay, under this bill, same scenario. You've been living in your house for years. A new agricultural operation moves in next to you. A couple of years later, they start creating nuisances that destroy your property values, create nuisances like odors that force you to stay inside. You are stuck living with it. Okay, you have no legal recourse whatsoever. So that's bad policy, in my opinion. Because what you're saying is people who have longstanding private property rights no longer have any ability to protect themselves from newly arriving animal operations or other types of agricultural operations. I don't think you want to see that. Now, the second point I want to make is because of that, this language is very possibly unconstitutional. Similar right to farm laws in Iowa have already been held to be unconstitutional. So what you are doing is setting yourselves up for more litigation against farmers, which I know is not the intent of this bill. And I support protecting farmers. Our current right to farm law is really, really strong. I am not aware of a single farm that has been shut down because of nuisances in the state of Georgia. We've done a great job, and the amendments that defined change conditions and defined urban sprawl have protected farmers really, really well. So let's not mess that up. So one thing I also want to mention is because you are removing that language, you are potentially setting up farms who are currently protected by the existing right to farm law to a lawsuit, to a legal challenge that this law is unconstitutional. So if you have a farm that's currently protected, they can now be sued with an as-applied challenge. Sorry for getting legal here, but with challenges that say, you know what? My property rights have been impacted. I am suffering from nuisances. This law is unconstitutional because I can't protect myself. So I'm going to sue this farm that's currently protected and try to get monetary damages. And I could bring claims for violations of the due process clause and potentially the equal protection clause of both the United States Constitution and the Georgia Constitution. And I know that's not what y'all want to do. Y'all do not want to be setting up farms for additional litigation. And I don't want that either. So I think, Mr. Giles brought up an excellent example about, how maybe change conditions isn't quite clear enough. Maybe there's ways we can do that. Let's do that. If we really want to strengthen this law, let's make some actual real clarifications to the existing language to make this law what it can be and as strong as it can be, rather than taking a sledgehammer to the entire law and completely altering nuisance law as it currently exists.
Thank you.
So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time today. Ms. Ruth Wilson. Thank you for being with us today.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for having me today. I'm here because I'm a farmer. I don't raise cattle. I don't raise chickens. I don't produce milk or eggs. I don't grow hay. I don't grow corn. I don't grow peanuts. I cultivate happiness. If you see the eyes of a little girl light up because it's always been her dream to ride a horse and here she is doing it, that's my payday. To host a class of autistic and Down syndrome children and see the joy in their faces when they pet a real life pony for the first time, that's my cash crop. To take a parade team to lead the Veterans Day Parade and then visit with brave servicemen living at the Carl Vinson VA Hospital and have old men shed tears as they talk about their glory days past when they rode horses, that's something money can't buy. When I love on my old 33-year-old rescued horse that doesn't have any teeth and has to be fed mush every day, I reap the best harvest there is, happiness. But on days that I can't go outside because the smell is so acrid, it makes your eyes water and your stomach heave, that's not happiness. I have to keep a broom by my back door to sweep the flies off of the door before I open it so that a couple hundred don't come in with me. That's not happiness. I've had to cancel that cute little girl's riding lessons because the smell is so bad she can't come to the farm because she can't breathe. That's not happiness. I feel like the current nuisance laws that are in place are very good. The nuisance I'm having is with a bad actor, as you mentioned, and we are working on it. We have been working on it. But I'm afraid if this bill is passed, like the young lady just said, big corporate agriculture could move in next door to anybody's little happiness farm and turn it into a misery. We all realize that the bill is not about us small farmers. I believe it's about protecting big corporate farms, not Uncle Joe's family farm. And the big issue that we have not discussed, and I did not find it anywhere in that paper, is the word waste. My horses make waste. I have to deal with it. Chickens make waste, and they pay good money to get chicken litter to spread on farms because it's great fertilizer. But there are all kinds of wastes associated with mass production farming that we haven't found a good way to deal with. And until the language is stronger in that bill, I'm very concerned about big corporate agriculture not handling their waste properly, not because necessarily they're bad actors. I keep hearing the phrase bad actors, but what do you do with thousands and thousands of pounds of waste? That needs to be mentioned in this wording because I don't want to be deprived of my right to farm. I was there before the bad actor moved in next door to me, and I have the right to enjoy my property and to tend my little 30 acres of happiness. So please protect my right to farm and leave the current bills as they are and vote no for HB 1150. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Thank you for being here today. Ms. Kim Scott. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being here today.
Good morning. Again, my name is Kim Scott, to the chair, committee members. I am board chair of Gilliam's Community Garden and Farms. It's a small 3-acre farm and garden right here in Southwest Atlanta. To the young man that stated that you wanted more ag, you got it here in City of Atlanta and Metro Atlanta. I'm also a member of the Georgia Water Coalition Legislative Committee, and Gilliam's Community Garden is in basic agreement with the importance of preserving their property rights, our property rights, and protecting urban areas from mega industrial agriculture operations. Again, we are a 3-acre sustainable urban garden located in Atlanta's West Side neighborhood. We've been here since 2014. Our diversified garden and farm has produced beautiful vegetables, herbs, fresh eggs, and our very own dried spice blends. Core to our mission is the determination to see more healthy, equitable communities across our great city and across our great state. In response to COVID-19, we distributed over 5,000 boxes of fresh, locally grown food to families across Metro Atlanta, and the need is still very great. But what we want you to consider when we talk about this House Bill 1150 is that most urban farmers don't have a nearby processing plant, and the large processing plants in Georgia do not allow them to process their own meats. From my understanding, the Georgia local meat producers have to go out of state to process. This is expensive and creates a disadvantage for local producers. House Bill 1150 would further exacerbate this problem by giving global meat corporations an incentive to move in and expand in Georgia. Small scale meat producers or processors that are locally owned produce smaller waste streams. We've heard a lot about that today, with less waste and more care for their neighbors and customers. The more corporate processors we have, the harder it is for local producers to bring their product to market. Another consideration that we would like for you to consider with this House bill is that House Bill 1150 would allow corporate processors and large-scale meat producers to move into residential areas and by existing farmers and escape accountability. Existing farmers and residents also need security that their investments are protected. Also, we wonder in this consideration for this House bill that there may be some distance requirements in proximity to neighboring residential communities and existing farms. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. Nathan Humphrey. Nathan, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'll be 30 to 60 seconds, I promise. I'm with NFIB. We represent small business owners in Georgia, and we have a big segment of our members that are either farmers or work in businesses that are directly or indirectly related to agriculture. And I don't have to tell this committee, as you know, the farmers are some of the just hardest working people you will ever meet. They're the most connected into the fabric of their communities. And it's an important part of the ecosystem of a lot of those communities where we have these farms. I'll just say that hearing from our members on this issue through surveys and ballots, it's an important issue. And I appreciate this committee looking at this. Most of our members are smaller. We don't have big, huge corporate farms, but it has been an issue where they feel like there's been instances where this has been weaponized to go after them. And because they are small, they're easy targets. So if you'll just, again, I appreciate you taking your time to look at this issue and again, think of them as you're deliberating this.
Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate you being here today. Mr. Alex Bradford, Georgia Farm Bureau. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you all. Thank you, committee, and thank you, Chairman, for bringing this bill. I'm Alex Bradford, representing Georgia Farm Bureau and individual farm families across the state in every county. And there's been a lot of speculation on who's pushing this. It's our individual farm families. We represent 250,000 members across the state, around 40,000 farmer members at convention each year, in our policy development process, at our local county board meetings. This is the number one issue that we hear about. This is something for the past several years they have prioritized. They have made a spotlight issue. If you were up here last week, there were about 500 to 600 of them that were here pushing this issue because it was so important to them. Those are individuals in your community. They are small business owners. They're grandparents looking to protect these farms and this livelihood and lifestyle for their future generations. This bill does provide, a lot of this has already been gone over, but it provides certainty in the law where there's currently ambiguity. Farming takes a lot of investment currently. That has increased significantly. There's a lot of external changes around our rural areas that pose a lot of misunderstanding with what goes on in farms. Despite when you buy property in rural Georgia where agriculture is allowed, you have to sign a disclosure that states that you acknowledge that you're moving into an area that might have dust, might have smells, traffic, operation at all hours of the night. You already have to sign that disclosure when you buy property in ag areas. This bill does not change any environmental regulation, law, permits, standards. One of the reasons why it is silent on dealing with waste is because it doesn't change it. There are processes in place. When you get a CAFO, you have to have nutrient management plans. Agriculture is one of the most regulated industries, and you have to follow a lot of rules and laws. Those do not change. This specifically does not protect those that are acting outside of the law or negligently. It maintains the local authority of local governments and zoning. Your local government can still dictate where agriculture is allowed and where it is not. This solely deals with nuisance lawsuits, which are subjective, and provides a protection to those folks that are following the law. It does not pit large or small farmers against each other. It does not give a leg up to corporate or mega operations or even those that are CAFOs. And we appreciate the chairman for putting addressing that in the new draft to specify that would reset the clock of protection. It also provides a chance for young farmers, as the Rural Development Council looks for ways to bring folks back home to rural Georgia to start a business and live and grow a family. It provides them an opportunity, as well as our urban ag folks, that would never get this protection under the current law. So I appreciate y'all's consideration, appreciate the work y'all have done over the past several years on this, hearing from our members back home, and encourage you to vote yes on this at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for your comments and being here today. We're about an hour and 15 minutes or so into it. We got a few more minutes. Do we have any questions from members of the committee for any of our speakers today? Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. First of all, I would just say nuisance litigation is not subjective. There's a legal standard and the court applies the legal standard. So there's an objective standard. But Mr. Secretary, I do have a question for the representative from NFIB, Mr. Humphreys, I believe. Are you aware of any other small business industry in our state that gets essentially a blanket immunity to litigation after 1 year? Are you aware of any other small business in our state that is essentially given a blanket immunity a bar to litigation after 1 year.
I'm not aware of any, and I don't believe that this bill would give blanket immunity either.
Thank you.
That's my understanding.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions from members of the committee? Mr. Lim.
Can anyone answer, I know the word lawsuits are being thrown around. Can we quantify how many of these lawsuits have been filed, particularly as it pertains to those farms or operations that have been in existence only a year? I would love to know.
I don't know about anybody that can answer that right now, but we will certainly work to try to get you an answer.
I was curious.
Mr. LaRicchia.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Just wanted to, again, close and comment, and I've listened to this for several years, had conversations with Farm Bureau farmers back home, and we have Pilgrim's Pride, big poultry processing operation. We know about all that. These are people that are helping feed the world. And I just don't feel like we emphasize enough that if some of you that have argued some of the blanket immunity accusations or the private property rights, if you'll come into the next committee hearing having not ate a bite of food in a week, I think our conversation changes. We are so blessed in this country that we throw away almost 30 to 40% of the food that we prepare every day to eat. Just throw it in the trash. We better start looking at this through the lens of what's going on with the supply chain and how important it is that we produce enough food to feed not just Georgia and the United States, but many of our farmers are helping feed the world. I don't like a housefly any more than you do. But please keep in mind the perspective of what we're talking about 20, 30, 40 years down the road to protect the farmer's ability to grow food.
Thank you, Mr. LaRicchia. Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to prolong this, but I would just encourage everybody in the room to be more careful with their word usage. We're throwing around words that are being misused, I believe. And respectfully, Representative, my cousin, Mrs. Wilson here, didn't testify to one housefly. She was talking about a lot. So we all, I think, acknowledge the incredible service and value that our agriculture community has to our state. And I don't think anyone is questioning that. I certainly am not. I don't think anyone who spoke here today is. And I don't think anyone would question the devotion and appreciation of every member of this committee to our agricultural community. There is a legitimate debate at the center of this. We're not having that today, and that's okay. But I would just encourage us all to be a little bit more respectful to one another. Thank you.
Mr. Donahue.
From a different perspective, I owned a logistics company for 30 years and bought a farm probably 2013, 14. I'm a beekeeper, so we do honeybees. And to show you from a different perspective, all around me, there's cattle farms. We have chickens. It's great to raise your family in the farm life that we are enjoying now. But some of the things I've seen is called craziness. When there's a subdivision a mile up the road that was a farm, there's dairy cattle up the road, there's beef cattle across the street, and they put in 120 houses. And all of a sudden, people call me because I'm the representative. And these are people that said, whoa, it sure stinks here this week. They're putting fertilizer, chicken manure on the fields like they've done 50, 60 years. Then all of a sudden they'll say, well, you're a farmer. And I'll say, well, I handle honeybees. Well, my daughter was stung by a honeybee. I think I could sue you for endangering my daughter. I looked at her and said, well, did you see all of my bees are tattooed? And she looked back. That was a stupid statement, but it's almost like, here's your sign.
we're dealing with things that are personal to each person here. But we do need to consider that if the farms are there, that's the respect, because subdivisions are moving into these old farms every day. And it's just stuff like that that I've dealt with, people coming up and just complaining. But after the last 2 years, I have to say that a lot of these subdivision people are understanding. They should have went and put a chair out for about a day and enjoyed that smell or enjoy the things. And the flies, I understand, can be bad certain areas, but it's just we're dealing with a lot of craziness. But thank you all for coming. Everybody is respected on your opinions.
Thank you, sir. Representative Thomas.
Thank you. Is Alex Bedford still? Question. Thank you. Georgia Farm Bureau, are you aware of any chapters across Georgia that is opposing House Bill 1150 as written?
Any Georgia Farm Bureau
Right.
offices? No. In fact, at convention, delegates from every county vote on our policy. It was unanimous. It was made a priority issue, and our board made a spotlight issue this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a note, I know that the author of the bill, Mr. Chairman, you are a multi-generation farming operation. There are others on this committee who farm, and we, like many of you in your business, we see our neighbors in the local coffee shops, local restaurants, and the farmers across our state do the absolute best job that we can to make sure that we are being neighborly. Like many farmers across our state, and the chairman, when things don't go well, we hear about it. But we live and work in the very same communities in which we farm, and we understand that. And as it was mentioned earlier, this regulation has not been updated in 40 years, and agriculture has changed in 40 years. So it very much, there's a need to take a look at this and see what we need to do as we move forward. And with that, Mr. Chairman, do you have any further comments, Mr.
No,
Chairman?
thank you, Mr. Secretary. Very well job done this morning. I just want to thank our committee, thank those in the audience for coming. Thank for all the help on this bill. And we'll revisit this. We'll have we've got some other meetings coming up for hearings for some other bills we got coming down the pike. So as I said earlier, be on the lookout for another meeting, hopefully later this week, or we'll have a busy week next week with a couple of committee meetings to try to tackle this. So thank you for your input, for your help, and meeting adjourned.